All right, super. Thanks, everyone. Let's call to order the May 24th ACSD board meeting. As always, we will, actually, before we get started, I just wanted to make one announcement or clarification. On the agenda, we've been using the word other, which I think has been somewhat confusing as to what falls under other. And from a point of order perspective, we try to keep that to announcements. So if somebody has an announcement similar to what I would be doing right now, that would fall under other. If there's something that you want to add to the discussion of a board meeting, if you could just send those items to me prior to the meeting that we have to set the agenda, and then we'll include them in the hopper because it allows us just to manage the time in an efficient way. So if there's stuff that you want to have, if you have questions on or you want an update on or anything like that, just shoot that stuff to me and then we'll add that into the hopper as we figure through the agenda for the meetings. So I just wanted to announce that prior to the other portion of the agenda. So thank you. So with that, call to order the meeting. As always, we'll start with introductions. I'll just call your name. If you could then introduce yourself. I'll go according to the grid that I see, which I'm not sure if what everybody sees, but we'll start with Peter B.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Mary Cullinane. Lorraine.
Lorraine Morse, ACSD board member.
Will.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Chip.
Chip Malcolm, board member.
Suzanne.
Suzanne Buck, board member.
Barb.
Barb Wilson, board member.
Jen.
Jen Newseeder, board member.
Mary G.
Mary Gill, board member.
Vicky.
Vicki Wells, Director of Student Services.
Peter C.
Peter Comlin, board member.
Caitlin.
Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Henry.
Henry Carpenter, student representative.
Betty.
Betty Kafumbe, board member.
Victoria.
Victoria Jetty, board member.
Mary Heather.
Mary Heather Noble, board member.
Lindsay.
Lindsay Hescock, board member.
And Amy. Amy, you're on mute.
Lindsay, you're so backlighted, we cannot see you except one dark person.
I'm trying to fix, I don't know if I just have to get closer, but
well, maybe you have to.
Okay, we'll just work through that. We'll get there.
All right.
Amy McGlashan's also here.
I am, and my connection's terrible, so I say hello, and then Peter, I may need to call. I'll text you if I need to call it.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. I don't think I missed anyone, did I? Great. And now, Peter, could you read out the attendees?
Yep, we have Beth Carter, Christina Johnston, Erica Garner, Hugh McLaughlin, Jane Harrington, MCTV, Nicole Carter, Ruth Bernstein, and Tanya Scuteri.
Great. Thank you very much. As always, we'd like to provide our public with the opportunity to comment at this time. If you would like to make a comment, please raise your Zoom hand. Peter will then bring you over into the panelist section. And when you're done with your comment, we'll move you back over to attendees. So do we have any public comments at this time?
It doesn't look like it.
Great. So next on the agenda is the recommendation or motion to approve the minutes of the May 10th board meeting.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Chip. Could I get a second?
Barb Wilson will second.
Barb Wilson, second. Any discussion or comments?
Thank you, Amy, for a very good job of doing the minutes when you were called on by acting chair Suzanne.
Well done. Suzanne, nice job filling in for the chair position. I truly appreciated it. Thank you very much.
Problem.
Great, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? And I'm abstaining, Suzanne, since I wasn't there,
As am I.
as is Victoria, as is Jen. Lindsay, much better, well done. Great. All right, next on the agenda is to approve the ACSD bills. Chip, you're up.
Bills were read on the 17th of May. General fund, $305,911.96. And I move that we pay the bills.
Great, can I get a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Great, so moved. And next on the agenda is report of the superintendent. Peter, you're up.
Great, thank you. So I want to start by inviting a couple of guests over. Christina Johnston, who, as you all know, has returned as Weybridge principal, which we are extremely excited about. So I'm hoping she says a couple things about that. And Erica Garner, who is our outgoing community coordinator. And they're going to be talking about Big Brother, Big Sister. This is has been a long runway to where we are now. We're really excited, and I'm going to allow them to talk about the work they've done as heroes on our Community Partnership Council. Okay, you both are good to go.
Okay, we are both good to go. So it's lovely to see all of you. And I have a couple of things to say. One is that I'm very excited to be back and am beginning the process of transitioning back with the school, meeting with families and Nicole and so forth. And so it's very fun to be thinking about this. And thank you for the opportunity. So then I'll put my Community Partnership Council hat on. Erica and I are here to share the information that we are have struck a partnership with Big Brother, Big Sister program of Vermont in order to provide mentoring to the community, the ACSD community. And it's very exciting. Since the inception of the Community Partnership Council, we've had a group that has worked on this. And it seems sort of like a simple thing to get started, but really the amount of work in terms of developing training, systems, being attentive to liability and safety issues and the rest of it continued to be really daunting for us. And very labor intensive. We were working on it, but it was very labor intensive, as was really putting together the funding in terms of granting and so forth. And so we're very excited at this point that we have brokered this partnership that with Big Brother, Big Sister, which is well established and grant funded program. So it takes a lot of just as breathing space for us. But I did want to give, before we get into too many details about that, just to let you know that there have been many people who have worked on this over the years, and most recently, and I would say intrepidly through COVID, we managed to meet and work on various issues and then strike this relationship with Big Brothers, Big Sisters. But I wanted to just give names of some of the current people who have worked on this. Kyle Mitchell, high school senior, has worked on it several years. Brooke Jetty, Katrie Fenster, Cecilia Robison from the Mid-Teen Center, Janet Lepiner, Kimberly Breckenridge, and I want to give a specific shout out to her. She worked tirelessly on granting and making communications, setting up communications with Vermont Mentor and with Big Brother, Big Sister program. And also a great deal of gratitude to Erica Garner, who has a fantastic way of shepherding projects through. And we wouldn't have been able to get where we are at this point without her. But all of those people have contributed. And we were still in this kind of daunting work, I think midwinter this year, when Big Brother, Big Sister appeared on the scene for us as a possibility. And we were all very excited. We did several meetings, had several meetings with them. We really vetted them, checked out how people, people that worked with them, how they felt about that. We spoke, consulted with Mentor Vermont, who has been our technical support up to this point, and they really support this program. And local granting foundations also really support the program. So we felt very good about it. And we're tremendously relieved because they've been at this work for a long time. So they have all of the systems in place that we were sort of struggling to reinvent the wheel around. And so that's been a wonderful piece for us to sort of like, we don't have to do that. Our task is very different and more limited, but the opportunities for having the mentorship program start is great. So our plan is that we will get the program underway in time for school to start open. And we'll be starting the program for Bridport fifth graders and at mums. So it sort of, there's this idea with mentorship programs that it's a really good idea to sort of start small and spread out. We would really have the intention of expanding it into the other schools as soon as we're underway and know, have it settled and the programs and systems clear for us. Information will be going out through the schools this coming week to solicit mentees and mentors so that they can sign up with Big Brother, Big Sister program, and we can really start this process in motion. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica so she can talk a little bit more about what systems the organization provides for us.
So yeah, as we started to meet with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Vermont and learn more about what they have to offer, we just got more and more excited because they just had everything in place that we really wanted to have in the program that we were trying to develop internally, and they've been doing it for a long time. They have a rigorous vetting of volunteers. They do all the background checks we do, plus more. They do an 1.5 hour long interview to really kind of, number one, get a feel for the volunteers, and would they be a good mentor, and also learn more about them to help with the matching process. They also do training for the volunteers, and when they do their matching, they really look at what's a best fit. They don't just say, okay, we have a mentor and we have somebody who wants a mentor or mentee, which they happen to call big and little, and just match them because they have 2 people interested in the program. They really pay particular attention to trying to make the best fit. So they try to learn as much as they can, not only about the volunteers, but also about the students and what would be a good mentor for them. Are they interested in horses? What is there something that they really like that would make this match, more compatible and successful? So they spend time with the students as well, and in some cases the parents, depending on where the program's at. So that once they think there's a good match, they say this is what we're thinking, and they confirm that the mentors and mentees agree, and then they facilitate an introduction meeting between them with Big Brother Big Sister support person, which is Jill Strube is the person who's running the program for us, to help with that first initial meeting. And then depending on the program, like at Bridport School, the mentor mentees would be meeting in the school building. The middle school age, it could be in the building or it could be out in the community, and the parents have some voice in that. But again, everybody's background checked, and they have all kinds of systems in place to facilitate how that works. And the other thing that they do that I think is really important is they do monthly check-ins with both the mentors and the mentees. So they really check in to see how it's going. So the mentors are really supported if there's things that come up that they aren't sure how to handle. They really have support along the way, and they're also checking in with the mentees, how's it going, and they can help jump in to facilitate that relationship as needed. They also offer quarterly gatherings for mentors and mentees between everyone in the program to bring everyone together and do some fun things together. So there's a lot of work that goes on all throughout the year. The school-based programs, like the one that would be in Bridgeport, would only be during the school year, like when there's schools in session. And the community-based for the middle school students as they're ready to go out into the community would be full year. And so the next step for us as the Community Partnership Council is to form an advisory council. In addition to getting all the information out to families and getting people signed up and working with Big Brothers Big Sisters to get that information out through the schools, our next step is really the advisory committee that's going to be formed. So the work will leave the Community Partnership Council and go into a separate committee that would be the ongoing support committee for really it's some people who know our community well and can help find potential mentors in the community, and also with donors and just, you know, what either corporate or individual donors could help support the program. So that group would work with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Vermont to facilitate that. Christina, is there anything else I missed?
No, I just think it's probably a question might be, they're grant funded, and a great deal of the expenses through them. We just supplement through soliciting donors and possibly doing some other grant writing, but it's really much less than we would have had to have done had we been solo. Because we really would need to have been able to support a director and to have, you know, just be able to fund several other aspects of the program. And as it is, it's basically, we have a partnership and have some financial obligation in terms of some fundraising, but not, we're not paying into the program in that way.
And I think I'm not sure if we mentioned this, that staff from Bridport School, the principal, and Elizabeth Burrows will be the liaison there. And then at the middle school, Andrew and Liam Batches. Liam Batches will be the liaison at the middle school. So they've been involved also in the planning and the discussions. And so they're fully on board with the work we're doing. Any questions?
That's great. I love the Big Brother Big Sisters program, mentoring in general. And when we think about equity, this is probably one of the areas that is most acute when trying to support kids who don't have, or for a myriad of reasons, are challenged to have strong role models in their lives. So thank you so much for this work. It's great to hear about. Any questions from the board? Chip? You're on mute.
You mentioned the funding component, and I just wanted to clarify, because I'm never quite clear on this. In the equity parts of school funding, basically we're not, Vermont doesn't allow us to have a donor supposedly support a school-sponsored something or other. They can maybe help with uniforms or something like that through some other like a sports sponsoring type of thing. But how does the funding work so that, in fact, other districts that may not have particular ways to, as you say, supplement, how does that work legally? You know, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to kind of think about it is, you know, we can't raise funds for the educational program itself. So we can't go out and solicit funds from the community to raise money if we want to hire, let's say we've budgeted, you know, $40 million budget, we want to hire 3 more positions. The community says, yeah, we want to throw in additional funds to hire these 3 positions. We can't go out and raise those funds. We can't accept funds for those 3 positions. There are ways that people do give to schools, and often it's through a parent group or a non-school affiliated group. It's not ACSD. It's, you know, friends of some school. That's one way that some of that work happens. Other ways are through booster clubs, you know, connected to athletics. In this case, I mean, this is an ideal situation where we're partnering with a national organization that does this work that also needs support. So we're kind of, I think it's going to be a growing relationship, and they've been willing to kind of foot the bill to get started and help the program get moving. And as we looked at the cost of what this was going to be, and I think Christina mentioned this in terms of hiring a part-time director and all the other pieces of this, we're in a much better financial position having them do it. Plus, they bring all this incredible expertise, and thus far they've been really open in terms of working together. So it's feeling like a really good match, and I think Kimberly, who has done, as Christina mentioned, has done a ton of work with this, Kimberly Breckenridge. When she had the initial connection, she also shared that she had done so much research. Spent about a year researching this, and it just felt like things kind of clicked together. So we feel like we're in a good place.
Yeah, I just wanted to make clear on that so that because there are some blurry lines there and how you.
Sure.
Barb?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And this sounds like a really awesome program. Just a couple questions. Are we going to, or will a Big Brother, Big Sister organization reach out to our local community? Because, beyond the school community, right? We want to get folks that are living here that may not have children that could contribute a lot to participate.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome.
Yep, that's really the role that we're hoping the advisory committee can help with is what the best way to reach our communities to get involved in a variety of ways, whether it's being a mentor or donating a financial toward.
Yeah. Sounds like an Addie Indy. John Flowers needs to write an article here.
Yeah, that's on the list.
Yeah.
We'll send him the video link from tonight.
Awesome. And then the other question I had was, what have we kind of articulated what our desired outcomes, goals for the kids that participate in this program? Just so that we know, like a year from now, we can take a look at it and assess it and then make a decision. Do we want to expand it to other schools, that kind of thing? How do we know we're successful?
I think there are a couple places, and I'll just start here, and then Christina and Erica, you can join in. But, I think if you look back to the strategic plan work we did in 2014, 2015, which in a lot of ways paved the way for where we are today, that created the Partnership Council. It also brought a real clear focus on student belonging as a key metric in terms of students being successful, both academically and socially and emotionally. So, one of the ways that we will be able to have data, obviously we have qualitative data in terms of talking to students about their experience, but we also have the YRBS. We also have, we're going to be launching an equity audit as well. So we'll have other forms of data too to be able to determine. Again, some of that data I think we can get down to the individual student level. Some is anonymous and it's broad to a school, but that essentially that's the metric that we're looking at: student belonging.
Awesome, thank you.
Peter C.
Thanks, Christina. I think wanted to respond to the previous question. So before I ask mine, go ahead, Christina.
Thank you. I think the other thing is that Big Brother, Big Sister also collects data really well. And if you go on their page, there's a really wonderful page that's quite just lovely to look at in terms of the percentage of students that stay in school, report staying in school because of this, that head to college, that feel as though they belong, all of those things. They have a system, a survey system that they use that I think will be very useful to us as well.
Thanks. So first of all, great program. Glad you're doing it. I'm just curious to know sort of the trend through Big Brother, Big Sister in terms of available mentors and sort of how you build up that pool of available mentors?
Did somebody get that?
I got it. I got it.
Oh, good. Their track record is really good. I can't speak to it specifically in terms of numbers, but it's one of the things that as we launch and people join into it and their success, word of mouth really helps. And they have a really strong system of reaching out to the community, which again, the advisory council, local advisory council would add to that in terms of really seeking. If we have X number of people, youth that want to have mentors, then that's really our task to fulfill that.
Hey, G. And then Betty, and then Amy.
Okay. Am I on? I can't.
Yep. You're
Okay.
on. You're on.
So thank you, Christina and Erica. This is obviously something that was very important when I was working. And so I'm very happy that you were able to get this started. One of my questions is, in the past, Big Brother, Big Sister generally meant maybe a college age or young adult working with a middle school student or a young high school student. Are we broadening the range of ages so that even somebody in their 30s or 40s could be a mentor? That's just one question.
Definitely. It's really geared towards older people doing this
Okay.
than the college students. There are other mentorship programs in the community, and the Big Brother, Big Sister program through the college still exists.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be there, but this is, and they could apply it to Big Brother, Big Sister, but really looking to the community and age range of people and interests
Okay.
to support students.
Yeah, because the upper age range hopefully means more longevity with the relationship. I know in the past when it was college students, sometimes the relationship would be severed after they went on leave or whatever.
Right.
And so the kids would lose that. The other question I have is, are you targeting any particular students to be the recipients of the little Big Brother, Big Sister relationship, or is it open to any family who, or a young child who says, gee, I'd like to have a mentor?
It's open to everybody. We will be having schools, as Erica talked about, Elizabeth Burrows and Liam Batches being middle school, that through the schools there would be some identification of possible people that would particularly benefit from it.
Okay.
But that would also have to come through communication with families. We
Right.
can't just refer on our own. It has to
Right.
have some communication there. The recommendation is that successful programs are really offered to everybody. That when you have a program that's only geared towards a certain group of students or a list of students, that it becomes a stigmatized program and fewer people enroll in that way.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Sounds
Yep.
great.
Betty and Amy, your hands went down. Are you good?
I have a question. So
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for that information. I was going to ask how the meetings, how you envision the meetings taking place. Would it be like a in person at the school, or is this like an after school program? And could you talk more about how the contact will happen and when it would happen between the mentor and mentee?
Erica, do you want to?
So at Bridport School, it would be it would be at the school during the school. It could be either during the school day or after school, depending on the schedule. And that's something that they'll figure out, like what works best. A lot of times mentors will come in and have lunch or play games or even go out with recess. So it depends on kind of what they learn as they're making those matches and what's going to work best for that pair. At the middle school, if families request that the match begins as a site-based in the school building, which I think will probably happen for some of our matches, that will happen after the school hours. It wouldn't be during the school day, just because of that age group. That works better to not have the matches meet during the school day. And then they can either gradually, like they could stay in the school for most of the match time and then go out into the community some of the time instead of transition, or they can just purely meet in the community when they're ready. But that's, the parents would have to agree to changing from one option to the next. Did I address everything?
Yeah, I was just curious, like if it's out of school, how it would be, would it require parent, supervision and that kind of thing? Because I thought it would be like a school within the school, and I wasn't sure if it's gonna be like the college. At the college, they had a similar program. I think at one point they also called it Big Brother, Big Sister. So I was wondering if it's the same format.
So they would go out on hikes. They would set up a meeting. They would decide where they're going to go week by week. And again, the Big Brother Big Sister program would be checking in with the student monthly. They would actually come to the school. The middle school would provide a space for them to meet with the students in the program and just check in and see how it's going. And they will also check in with the mentors. So there's a lot of check-in along the way to facilitate that relationship. But those would be, the community base would be out in the community doing a variety of different things.
Great. And Amy, do you have a question or are you all set?
I'm all set. Mary pretty much asked them, and it was about integrating with the college program, the community friends and that kind of stuff. So I'm all set. Thank you.
And we have worked right along with the college program. So all of the mentorship programs sort of know about each other. And this is filling a niche that isn't actually filled by the college program.
Great.
Great. Thank you all very much. Peter?
Great. So I'm going to give a quick update on the state board meeting last week and kind of where we're going. And then I'm going to introduce Vicki and team to do an awesome presentation. So as you all know, State Board of Ed meeting was last week. It was the second meeting where the state board was taking up the Ripton secession. The outcome of that meeting, and that link is now live. So if I sent you the link to where you can find the video for the meeting. That is now, I checked, and that has been posted. So if you do want to go back and check that out, please follow that link I sent. So the board first approved the Ripton secession. It had asked, as you remember, for Ripton to follow up and communicate with nearby school districts to determine that there was enrollment space should Ripton not offer K-6. So they checked with ACSD. I think they checked with Mount Abe, and they may have checked with Rutland Northeast too. So that was passed. They then discussed ACSD and should ACSD exist. They approved that as well, and kind of spent a little bit of time kind of discussing the board and towns versus individual towns in terms of, because the language is written in such a way, the language, as has been stated many times, this statute is very poorly written and does not fit at all with the current reality of both ACSD probably and many other districts like us. So part of the challenge of this process has been the state board just trying to determine with Donna Russo Savage has been carrying a big part of it too, doing a lot of research to try to determine and kind of create bright lines on something that, the language is somewhat gray. So the second part after the approval of those two the Ripton secession and ACSD continuing to exist. The next step, there really are two next steps. One is the financial settlement between ACSD and Ripton, and that will happen by August. I am working with legal counsel to determine, and I'll probably be working with the state too, to determine what our next step is with that, what we need to provide. From what I understand, there's going to be a vote to approve that financial settlement. So what that looks like, who is in charge of that? Is that the state? Is that us? Is that Ripton? I don't know yet. That's not articulated. So we have those things to research. And I'll probably have more information by our next meeting to know exactly kind of where we're headed with all those pieces. And then the next decision about which SU the Ripton is assigned to is at the board's September meeting. So that's the update thus far.
Great. Any questions, folks? Mary Heather?
Thanks, Peter. I've got a couple of questions. One is, I guess what I'm wondering, just from our responsibility as a board standpoint, will we need to have sort of our testimony prepared for the State Board of Education's September meeting in terms of how we feel about which supervisory union option?
Yeah, I think you will for sure. I as I mentioned, I think in the last meeting, Ripton has been in conversation with White River. I don't know exactly where that stands right now. I think we'll know a lot more in terms of what we need to bring forward in September in the next month or so, to know if it's, what kind of information would be important to share. So I think we'll have a much clearer picture in about a month on that.
Okay, and just to follow up to that, I mean, my understanding is that the board typically takes July off in terms of meeting, and I'm just wondering how that will coincide with the sort of testimony, we'll want to prepare for that. So, is it your sense that we'll still be able to get done what we need to get done in time?
I think so. It's mid-September.
Okay.
So I think we'll have plenty of time to put data together, think about the different impacts and to prepare to present that.
Right. Okay. And I guess two other aspects. One is that I understand the other member towns will need to approve this financial agreement that is brokered between ACSD and the new Ripton School District. And my sense is, just from reading what you shared with the state board's formal approvals or formal motions, that we don't necessarily need to have that vote by September. But do we have a sense of what would be realistic?
One question I have is, if it becomes active in 22, like July 1, 22, which is where it's currently slated to become active, could that vote happen any time within that year? So right. I think that's a question I have. I mean, it's obviously so much easier if that could get on, for example, a town meeting
right.
Vote. We don't have to hold a special election or special vote for that one item. So right. That's some of the information I'd like to gather to see what's the most efficient and best way for all towns.
Great, thank you.
Chip, you're on mute.
Obviously, next year, starting in September, Ripton sixth graders will attend MOMS. I don't have any sense of whether the Ripton School Board, once they decide, will decide to keep their sixth graders and send children starting to moms presumably in the seventh grade? Is that something that's ever come up in the discussions, or is that something we have to wait? Because that does influence us a little bit, even though they're not huge numbers, budgeting for that coming year when they're not here, so to speak.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything definitive. I think they, from what I understand, I think they're leaving it open right now to K5 or K6. So I'm not sure that's nailed down. I don't think it can be nailed down yet because the board hasn't been selected. So I think once the Ripton board is formed, then that's when something, a statement could be made about that would carry some weight.
But hopefully that would happen before we're making our budget for the next in the fall.
Yeah, it will before then. Yeah. That's Ripton's next step, is forming a board.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Great, thanks, Peter.
Okay, thank you.
Mm,
So now tonight's star attraction is Vicky's presentation. Vicky has a few days left in ACSD, and I didn't want to let her go easily, so I asked her to prepare a presentation and bring her team, which I am excited to bring over now. So I'm going to bring over Beth Carter, who has been Vicky's intrepid right hand for a number of years here as our primary, and this year our special ed coordinator, and Nicole Carter, who is our new director of equity and student services, who is taking over for Vicky and has been Vicky's left hand over the last month as she's learning throughout this transition. So I'm going to bring her over now. And Vicky, take it away.
Great. And do I have screen sharing, Peter?
You should. Let me know if you don't.
Okay. Got it. So let me just get this set up. Great. Thanks. So, so Peter just asked for me to kind of look at student services and also in context of the design teamwork and then looking ahead. So I just pulled together some pieces of information. The first thing that I want to do is just give you an overview of student services, the team, and kind of look at it by the numbers, and then walk you through again some of the tenets of the district management group and the design team work, and then move to kind of where we are and where we are headed. And I know it's we, the proverbial we, because like Peter said, a little bit less than 4 weeks left. So in terms of student services, we have a large district team that's made up of myself, which is going to soon to be Nicole Carter as the Director of Equity and Student Services. We have 2 special education coordinators, and that has shifted over the years from an associate director position to 2 school-based positions. And right now, the way it's set up is there's an elementary who covers all of the 7 elementary schools and a secondary who works at the middle school and the high school. And a lot of their role really is oversight of compliance and paperwork and being the local education agency at many of our IEP team and evaluation meetings. We have across the district K through 12 or 12 plus, we have 25 special educators. We also, for our little ones, our 3 through 5 year olds, we have 4 essential early ed special educators. And one of those is a current vacant position for next year. So we're hoping to get that advertisement out. We have a total of 7 full-time speech and language pathologists on staff. Right now, we are moving into the new school year with 2 vacancies. So we're doing everything that we can to get those 2 positions filled. We also have 2 school psychologists. We have a board certified behavior analyst who does work across the district, but the last couple of years, most of that work has been focused at the elementary level. And she oversees 2 behavior specialists. Again, most of that work is at the elementary level. We also have Jill Manny as the administrative assistant to student services, and we have a 0.6 Medicaid clerk that does all of our billing. So that just kind of gives you a picture of the larger team itself. In terms of the student services team, we have oversight of, and I pulled out the kind of the big pieces. There's lots of little pieces that fall under here, but we have oversight of special education throughout the district, pre-K through grade 12. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. Educational support systems and teams. We also have oversight of any Title IX investigations and complaints, hazing, harassment, and bullying, and work a lot with the building principals to make sure that when complaints do come forward, that investigations follow process and protocol, and any of the information or questions runs through me at this point. We also do a lot of work around interagency coordination, and its agencies such as mental health, so Counseling Service of Addison County, Department of Children and Families. We also do some work with Lund Family Services that oversee adoptions and other services to best support all of our students who struggle. And then we have oversight of the guidance and the nurses who are part of the shared staff that work across multiple school districts. So that kind of gives us in a snapshot. We also oversee implementation of many student level plans. And there's kind of 3 main types of plans that we oversee. And the first is an individual education program. And those IEPs are developed for students who are found eligible for special education services. And I'll go into that eligibility in a second. Section 504, which I just talked about, it's developed for students who have a disability that substantially limits their access to learning. And it's part of the overall Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act that prohibits discrimination based on disability. So it's really an access law. And when a student is eligible for a 504 plan, they have a disability that substantially limits their access. And then finally, we have educational support team plans, and it really is all students who need to access additional services in order to be successful. So I went through and did a general plan by numbers. And currently, in these numbers, just to put it, these numbers change on a day-to-day basis. So you have a snapshot of a point in time. So currently there are just over 15% of students within our district who are eligible for special education services on an IEP. In terms of 504, and again, disability with that substantially limits access, we have 7.5% of our total population is on a 504 plan. And then we have 11.5% of our student population that is on an educational support team plan. And then almost 66% that have no plan at all. And in a typical system, what we shoot for is about 80% of students not needing a plan that are getting their full support within the general ed classroom. So we've got a little bit of shifting that we need to be doing. So I took a look at, I had done a presentation of student services back in 2018. And I took a look at our numbers from back then. And at this point in time, we have approximately 34% of students K through 12, and I did not include pre-K because it's a little bit different, but we have 30, like I said, 34% are either on an IEP, a 504 plan, or an EST plan, which is up 7% from the fall of 2018. We have 15.6% of our students eligible for an IEP, which is up 3% from the fall of 2018. We also have, like I said, 7.5% of students on 504 plans, up 3% from 2018 as well. And the 11.5% of students on EST plans is up about 1.5% from 2018. So our numbers of students who are eligible to receive services continues to rise over the last few years. When we look at special education in particular, which really is the largest piece of the position, in order for a student to be determined eligible for special education, there is a comprehensive evaluation process that needs to take place. It's not simplistic. We really want, when we put a student or when we make a student eligible for special education, we really want to justify the reasons why that student needs to be identified as a student with a disability. So the first step for special education is, does the student have a disability? And under federal and state law, we have about 13 disability categories that we need to adhere to. If it's determined that a student has one of those disability categories, then we look at their performance and their academic work or other pieces, and does that disability significantly impact a student's ability to access school, and are they adversely affected by that disability? And typically it means, are they in the lowest 15th percentile of their grade level peers in order for that disability to have an adverse effect? And then the last piece is need, and does a student who has a disability that is adversely impacted, or that their education is adversely impacted, do they have a need above and beyond what the school typically offers to all students? And if the answer to all three of those is yes, then the student becomes eligible for special education, and then we develop an IEP. So that's a big chunk of the position, is the development of evaluations, IEPs, sitting at meetings, et cetera, and really determining what are the most appropriate services for students. I wanted to just kind of put a bug in everybody's ear that as we look ahead, the rules governing eligibility for special education in the state of Vermont will be changing in July of 2022. So that is going to require some training of special educators, as well as training of some of our general ed staff, as well as we go to implement those new rules and regulations. Act 173 that folks have heard about will change the way special education is funded in FY23. And as I started to really think through all of those changes and the impacts that it could have on ACSD, I think this is where this presentation is heading, that the work that the System of Services Design team has been building on will develop that framework to support the implementation of both the regulation changes as well as the fiscal changes and how special ed is funded over the course of the next several years. So I also took a snapshot for folks of current categories of disability, and these have shifted a little bit also since 2018. And our largest percentage of students who are eligible for and receiving special education services are students in the category of specific learning disability. And that basically shows when there is a discrepancy between what the student is capable of doing, what their cognitive abilities are, and what their actual achievement is. And there needs to be a high enough discrepancy between cognitive and achievement for a student to be eligible in that area. We have students who have a specific learning disability in reading, some who have it in math, some who have it in writing. It varies across the district. We also have a number of students who are considered speech language impaired, and that's again with expressive or receptive language. Developmental delay is a catch-all for our younger students, and mostly grade ages 3 through 5, but we can maintain that category of disability up until age 9. So we have some kindergartners, first graders, and second graders that still carry that label. Autism has gone down a bit since 2018 to 6.1%. We are increasing in our number of students who are considered eligible under the category of emotional disturbance, and that's typically behavioral. And then we also are seeing a slight increase in other health impairment, and that could be students with attention deficit disorder and some other health related issues. And then the other 7.8% of our students make up all of the other categories. So that gave you a snapshot. Now in terms of moving forward to better support all students who struggle, and I wanted to give you the snapshot to give you a sense of the percentages of students that we're talking about and the types of supports and services that we provide. And within the special education 504 and educational support teams, we provide direct specialized instruction to students through licensed special educators, speech and language pathology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, behavioral support, and a multitude of other supports and services for students. So the next few slides are going to be a quick review. The System of Services Design Team work, we met for 18 months or so between 2020 and 2021. And we spent a lot of time reviewing and discussing research on supporting struggling learners, staffing, and really looking at expertise and how we design the roles and responsibilities of all of the staff. On literacy, one of the pieces that we continue to hear from district management group as well as from others is that in order to improve the system for all students and especially for those that struggle, we need to have an unrelenting focus on literacy in the schools. Looking at assessment and also looking at pedagogical practices. And again, we worked with district management group. We worked with Michael Giangreco from the University of Vermont. We read a lot and had Shelley Moore come visit and multitudes of other things that we took a look at. So the remainder of the slides is really taking 18 plus months worth of work and giving you the most basic tenets of that work boiled down. So I just wanted to remind everybody of the guiding principles. This has come in front of the board a couple of times at this point, and these were the principles that really district management brought forward, saying if you want to change services and supports for students who struggle and optimize opportunities, these are the guiding principles that we need to focus on. So it's the providing universally designed first instruction that meets the needs of most students, adequate additional time beyond core instruction, ensuring students who struggle receive support from high qualified professionals or highly trained professionals, strengthening, for us it's strengthening a system for providing effective social, emotional, and behavioral supports, and then providing students with more intensive needs instruction beyond core instruction from skilled professionals. And as you've heard me say in the past, many of our highest need students get a chunk of their day from paraprofessionals. And while that helps support them in many, many ways, they also need more time with more highly skilled professionals. So again, best practices. So we're going to we looked at guiding principles. A lot of the time that the team spent was really looking at those guiding principles, the best practices, and then we'll look at attitudes, perspectives, and beliefs in order to really develop the system of services that will meet most kids' needs. So best practices is daily intervention opportunities for students that struggle. ensuring that all students, all struggling readers are supported by highly trained and highly skilled teachers of reading, extra time intervention, even at the middle and high school level, ensuring that all struggling secondary students are supported by content-specific teachers, because the content-specific teachers really know the depth of the content that they need that student to understand and can pinpoint those essential skills. Expanding our social, emotional, and behavioral supports to increase teacher capacity. And then again, ensuring that students with mild to moderate needs are supported by appropriately skilled classroom teachers and content interventionists. And then looking at attitudes, perspectives, and beliefs, that building a system without having the attitudes, perspectives, and beliefs in play can really undermine the system in the long run. So ensuring that we truly believe that each and every student belongs and is a valued member of the school community as we move to more inclusive practices. Making sure that each and every student has a right to access high quality first instruction. That all students, we need to remember, all students have untapped potential, and we need to keep in mind the least dangerous assumption. We need to believe that students can meet the expectations that we set for them. If we look at a label of, let's say, learning impaired or specific learning disability, and our expectations go down because of that label, we're doing our students a disservice. We need to make sure that the responsibility for each and every student is shared by all, and that no matter what, we maintain high academic and behavioral expectations, and that they're clear and they're upheld. So that was really a lot of the work that the design team focused on. And as we started thinking about where we're heading and the building of an inclusive model, it really needs to be intentionally designed. And that intentional design consists of supports the design of an effective and efficient tiered system. And that's tier 1, which is universal classroom instruction, tier 2, which is intervention, and tier 3, which are more targeted interventions for students who are further behind. That we really thoughtfully shift to a single educational system and remove the current silos of general ed and special ed. We really need to make sure that we're one united, effective, cohesive system. We need to leverage our ability to proactively eliminate barriers so that we can better support learning. And we need to target our resources to help remove those barriers. And we need to optimize cohesive, consistent, high quality first instruction so that we can really increase the learning opportunities of all to maximize student learning. We also need to ensure that we optimize the opportunity for staff to learn together, support one another, and plan collaboratively, because without that, it really does become, well, you're doing that work and you're doing that work, and it continues, it perpetuates the silos that we have been working in. We need to ensure that there's a positive impact on the teacher's ability to meet a wider variety of student needs within the classroom. Enhance opportunities to bring the community and the staff together to support more inclusive practices for all of the students. We need to improve the flexibility and fluidity of staff so that we can make sure that our students are provided that just right support. And just right, not only just right support and services, but at the right time. So when I look at what we're doing now and what we need to do in the future, we need to build stronger systems. We have some great systems that are in the process of being developed. We need to strengthen them and make them more cohesive. We need to increase the capacity of classroom teachers to reach and teach all of our students. And I go back to the 1990s when we first came out with what was called Act 230. And it was an act to do exactly what we're talking about here, increase the capacity of classroom teachers to meet the needs of all students, because back in the 90s, throughout the state of Vermont, the number of and percent of students eligible for special ed continued to be on the rise, while the general population of all students was on a decline. And we're back in that same situation, not only across the state, but as I look at it in the district, our numbers are slowly declining, but our percentage of students who are eligible continue to increase. We need to make sure that we use data-driven decision-making in regards to instruction and interventions, and look at data at the student level, the classroom level, as well as the systems level to really make informed decisions about instruction and pedagogical practices that work for all kiddos. We need to provide high quality research-based intervention from trained staff. We are working to better define the roles and responsibilities of general educators, interventionists, special educators, paraprofessionals, to make sure that everybody's doing the job that they need to do to support students, and ensuring collaborative planning between and among educators that support students, so that we're all on the same page, and that especially for students with disabilities and significant disabilities, those teams can be really large. And if those teams aren't all heading in the same direction and rowing in the same direction, the student is the one who can suffer in that. So where we are right now in the process, when I look specifically at literacy, we've added an additional intervention position. We've added a literacy coordinator through ESSER funds for both of those. We have a small group right now of administrators, and that group will grow, really analyzing our literacy needs across the district. We are looking at professional development on literacy instruction as well as other practices. And again, with that unrelenting focus on reading. And we're working on curriculum that's vertically and horizontally aligned, that has a scope and sequence of skills, especially the most basic and most essential skills that students need in order to be scaffolded to get to the next progression of learning skills. We're also in the process of increasing our data literacy use and analysis. We are rebuilding and realigning our systems for intervention, especially as we add on a literacy coordinator and we increase the number of interventionists to support students, really making sure that we're consistent, we're cohesive across the district. And this year we were able to, with the ESSER funds, be able to add interventionists to two schools that hadn't had an interventionist in the past. So that feels really good as a great step forward in regards to equity. Again, looking at staffing distributions that's more equitable. In the past, much of the staffing that we still have is based on when schools were under their own boards. And now that we're unified, really taking a look at those staffing patterns and trying to better align that with the student needs. One of the big pieces that we're doing is we're revamping our ACSD education support team handbook so that we utilize the practices and the processes that we've had developed to ensure more consistent application across the district. We're also looking at for our special education plans, our IEPs and our Section 504 plans. They're all housed in a web-based application called GoalView. We're looking to also do the same for our educational support team plans and have all of the data in one place. So as students need additional services and supports, schools will be able to see that longitudinal view of what students have received, where they've struggled, what worked well, etc. So really looking at tightening up some of the systems that we have. And then again, when we look at strengthening our systems, we know in order to do this work, we need to provide support to our classroom teachers, support to our special educators, our interventionists, our principals. We need to provide professional development, scaffolding, and opportunities to learn together along the way. And we know, again, that there's no quick fix. We've talked about this a couple of times. This is going to take several years to build a system that is cohesive, coherent, and as strong as we need it to be to ensure that students who struggle get their needs met. My computer won't forward. Let me just open my other one. Sorry about this. And I don't have it in front of me, so just there, your entertainment for the night. So the other piece is, as we do this, is really thinking about the work that's going to take to be purposeful and thoughtful about the work that's ahead. That's critical. We need to be, when we talk about our staffing, when we talk about supporting students, when we talk about aligning staff to better meet or maneuvering staff around to better meet the needs of students, we really have to be thoughtful about the data that is behind the decisions that we're making. And so my last two slides didn't save from earlier today. So I'm just going to say thank you very much. But I think we're in a place where we've started to do the work. There's still a lot of work to do. And the design team kind of ended as COVID came in, and a lot of the work that we're looking at in terms of recovery teams is a lot of the work that the design teams were focusing on, or that the design team was focusing on.
Thanks, Vicki. Peter, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to, first I wanted to let Vicki also introduce Nicole and Beth formally. You all heard about Nicole, you know Nicole from Weybridge, but haven't seen her in person since she took over the position. So just wanted to do that first.
Great. So I'll start with Beth. Beth has been the elementary special ed coordinator for the last 2 years and 3 years. Oh my goodness, the last 3 years. Wow, time does fly. And she started her first 2 years was elementary special ed coordinator. And this year it's been my left, my right, my everything hand, because when Andrew moved to the middle school, we were able to hire Andrew's position, which was Laura Kiefer. And within the first couple of months, Laura went to help Andrew out at the middle school, leaving Beth and I to do the work of two. So I thank you, Beth, for all of the work that you have done. She is an incredible asset to the district and to the work that the elementary schools are doing. Has an incredible systems mind, and yet dots her I's and crosses her T's as well. So thank you for everything.
Thank you very much.
And then incoming as it's not Director of Student Services, it's going to be Director of Equity and Student Services is Nicole Carter, who I have known through a number of ways over many years, and came to Addison Central as the principal at Weybridge. And we kind of joked here and there of, oh, when I leave in 5 or 6 years, you'll take over. And when I got the other job, she's like, wait a minute, you said 5 or 6 years, not 2. So I am thrilled. Nicole and I have been working together for, like Peter said, for the past month and a half or so since Nicole has been announced as the new director, and have had the opportunity to really dig in and learn from the ground up. So welcome, Nicole.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say just about Vicki's presentation, and this kind of pertains to the work that Beth and Nicole and the whole team will be doing, I think in the next year or two ahead, is I think we're in a really good position right now, having done the design team work, having looked at our services, having done a lot of research, we're now at the point where we need to take action and do the work. We don't have to research more. We know what we need to do. We have a pretty clear sense of what our direction is. And, you know, as we look ahead, and some of this will be coming when we start talking about the budget in the fall and start looking at positions we need to shift and move and add to, and all those decisions are going to be driven by the system that we're building. You know, Vicki mentioned this work takes time, and when I think about this pertains to the conversation around being a district versus being a supervisory union. When I think about the systems that were in place previously in all of our schools and how long it takes to change them, like to truly change them at the core. There is so much learned behavior in every school building that gets carried on and gets passed on. And even when you design a great system and you create a little, you know, punch list when you're going into the EST, these are the things you need to do. And then humans become involved in that process and things become much more complex. And I think we have really helped, and Vicki has really led the vision part of, we have to do this together as one single district, and is now handing it off to Nicole to really implement that. So we've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of talking. We're now, I think, poised for action.
Yes.
Peter, thank you for that. And Vicki, thank you for everything, including this presentation. Peter, could you just, before we take questions, talk a little bit about the change in language with Nicole's role and how we should, as a board, think about that?
She's in charge of fixing anything that's inequitable.
Yeah.
Standing.
In all seriousness, she, her title, Director of Equity and Student Services, one of the main reasons that I made that shift to Director of Equity and Student Services is related to what Vicki shared in terms of thinking about special ed and general ed as one thing, as opposed to thinking about it as separate things. So we have students in ACSD on a continuum, right? And every day they're in a different place on that continuum. That's really how we need to and want to look at education, not as this student is in general ed, this student is on a 504 and they go over there. This student is on IEP and they go over there. It's a profoundly different approach to thinking about how we meet the needs of all students. The federal legislation, which, you know, with Elementary and Secondary Act, which is grounded in student services, is important. Like, those protections from the federal government are important, but they have led to, across the country, isolation of special ed from general ed. And so when I was saying that we're poised to move, we're poised to really, I think, tackle that dualism and bring it together, as opposed to having them be separate systems.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll start off with Mary G, then go to Mary Heather.
Thank you. Vicki, wonderful presentation. I think it's needed for a long time. My one question is, under best practices, you said increasing teaching capacity. And I kind of get what you mean by that, because, and I agree with Peter that all the students in the classroom are capable and should all be taught together. But some students definitely require more time in certain skill areas, whether it's reading or math or social, emotional, etc. So how do you envision increasing teacher capacity given the numbers of students in the general ed classroom? I know we're talking about more interventionists, but I'm talking about the general classroom, how to meet the needs of all those very diverse learners.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So some of that comes from really designing universally. So when teachers are designing their units, designing their lessons, designing to the edges to meet a wider variety of students with that first instruction. And it also means giving them some more information on ways to access. So as I think about the collaboration between regular educators, special educators, and interventionists, special educators are experts in the disability areas and on how to get around the disability and utilize strengths to really access, for some kiddos, access that education. That collaboration, that designing to the edges, that designing universally so that every student has an entry point will help build that capacity. So I don't see it as meaning that every classroom teacher, only, is the only teacher for their students. They're the primary teacher. And they're the ones who more likely than not are spending 90% of the day with the student. And so the specialists can do what the specialists do in terms of that really specific skill instruction, but it needs to be carried over into the classroom. So when I think about building the capacity, it's supporting universal design for learning, it's supporting the collaboration and supporting teachers working together to really understand how best each student learns.
A daunting task, I must say.
Mary Heather?
All right, thank you. And Vicki, thank you so much for your presentation. It was super informative, and as a parent of a kiddo who is served by special services, I find it just very comforting to know that the sort of vision is this universal design and, the kind of anxiety that parents like myself feel, particularly when, it's that 3-year time to reevaluate period comes up and whether or not your kid's going to qualify and get what they need. It seems like the vision is to, ensure that the kids get what they need, whether or not they qualify. So that's just a really comforting aspect, just from a parent perspective. And I just want to say thank you for all the work your team's doing to make that happen.
Thank you. And if I could work anybody, like if I could work myself out of a job by not having to label students to get what they need, I do it.
Exactly. And, I guess I did see a presentation on it where the concept is kind of like, instead of taking an old building and retrofitting it for disability, it's kind of like building your curriculum like a new building with access for everyone. So I think that's just a great concept, and I'm really excited that's moving forward. 2 questions for you. One, I'm just curious about you and others on your team, just your observations about the increases that we've been seeing in our district and the number of kiddos that are meeting eligibility for these services. Just what your thoughts are, whether that's, I don't know, just kind of an inherent thing we're seeing, or whether it's something where we're just identifying more since coming together as a district and we're seeing more because we're looking more. So that's my first question, is just your thoughts on that increased number. And then secondly, I'm just wondering if you can speak to just the district's ability to kind of pivot to these upcoming changes and meet what students need just in our current configuration.
Okay, so I'll start with the first one. And I think it's a confluence of pieces in terms of the increased numbers. I think one is that since 2014, we've had a district-wide evaluation team. And prior to that, there were real inconsistencies in a lot of the determinations around eligibility. So I think our team, now, and it's been 6 years that we've had that team, which seems like a really long time, but it really, in the larger picture of things, it really isn't. I think that team is getting tighter and much clearer about what their role is and what they're doing. I think we have students now coming in who have greater needs than they have had in the past. I think we often, especially from a classroom, we often jump from educational support team to making an assumption that a student needs specialized instruction. So they kind of jump really quickly to referral for special ed. Because I think there's a sense that if a student isn't eligible, they may not get what they need. So some of that is just a rise in referrals. Some of it is the increased needs, and some of it really is the disparity between some of the resources within each of the buildings. Some buildings have more resources than others, so may not jump as quickly. Others have less resources. So I think, and Beth, Nicole, feel free, especially from a principal perspective. But either one, jump in.
There's 2 sliders, but you need to get one.
I thought I could hear someone else talking. Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that I would like to see change is that when we provide intervention, that we're truly targeting the skill deficit that the student has. Oftentimes, we need to, out of necessity, group students. And so we may be targeting skills that aren't specifically where they're lacking. So that I think as we start to utilize data, really to start doing deeper looks and probes into where the student is falling behind or being challenged, we can really target our intervention to meet those so that they can get back on track quicker. And I just think the addition of a literacy coach or coordinator is going to be a huge help. I'm very excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And second question.
Yeah. Can you repeat that, Heather or Mary? Yeah, Mary Heather.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious, you mentioned these upcoming changes with respect to, the eligibility requirements and kind of having to pivot a little bit about certainly how we're defining and identifying those students, but also the funding aspects. I'm just curious how you see the district's ability to pivot to that in its current configuration versus, kind of what would be the optimal way to deliver what students need.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. So I see the ability of the district to pivot relatively quickly. I think when we take a look at the pieces that are currently in play and that we're looking to strengthen, and if given the time to do the training and to do it well, I really do think we're in a good place to pivot. A lot of the rules and regulation changes are going to, the premise of them is that we have a strong system of services so that we have strong first instruction, strong intervention, and then strong kind of tier 3, tier 4 support. And as long as those systems are in place and are continually being added to and strengthened, we'll pivot really easy. If we do not have strong, high quality first instruction, we're going to have a harder time pivoting. And the same is true not only for the rule changes, but for the funding changes as well.
Great. Lindsay, then Barb.
Thank you for that presentation. I really appreciate the time you must have put into pulling all that together. I have several questions, and if that's okay, I guess I should probably just go one by one so it doesn't get lost. When you say interventionist, do you mean one-on-one or
not necessarily
paraprofessional? What's the term for the one-on-one support in this model?
So one-on-one support would be a much higher level of support, and typically it's students who have either personal care needs or high significant behavioral needs. So interventionist is a licensed teacher who usually has a deep knowledge of, let's say, literacy or math, who works with students more often than not in small groups, like usually 4 to 6 students. And again, it really depends on the size of the school. But about 4 to 6 students to really hone in on the foundational or essential skills that students need to get to the next learning progression. So interventionists are licensed teachers.
Okay. And what's the role of CSAC with the student services? Do you work together with them, or is that the people who are hired to work in the school system? How do they work within the system, or is it parallel?
So good question. And in some it's we work with, and some it's well, we always work with. So there's 3 separate types of support that's provided through the Counseling Service of Addison County. One is what's called school team, and within that, and it's a school that contracts with CSAC to provide a board certified behavior analyst, as well as some behavioral interventionists who oversee some of the support of specific student programming, especially for students with high behavioral needs. The second support that CSAC provides are school-based clinicians. Most of our schools have school-based clinicians, and those are typically social workers who work with students within the school, but also support the family outside of the school, and they tend to have smaller caseloads. And the final support is called Intensive Support Services Program, and that is typically for kids with more significant disabilities that really need a strong behavioral approach to learning and to increasing pro-social behaviors. And we right now have 6 or 7 within district, and those are typically contracted based on priority needs. So those are kind of the 3 roles that CSAC plays within district.
Okay. So my next question is this the student services, the program that you're talking about? Is there an element of that plans for students who need more of a challenge in the classroom, who, they've already sort of, in the old days, there was a talented and gifted program, and there's different things like that. But, if a student already knows the content and you have a universal approach, some students will actually act out because they're bored. So does that fall into this in some way?
It doesn't, not within how the team is defined. That usually falls to the school for that support or that enhancement for students.
So it's not a formal program, but each classroom teacher would be trying to identify ways of meeting the needs of learners who have a need in a different way than like the IEP 504.
Yep, and that really
EST.
falls to that universal design of really kind of designing to the edges so that you're supporting all entry and access points, so that students who need more of a challenge get more of a challenge.
Okay. With what I know, you won't be here with the Ripton, but thinking about tuitioning students in, when you're hiring, you have these vacancies and so forth. Do people tuition in students who have these needs, and their funding just comes with them? So you're actually planning to be hiring for not just the ACSD students, but the students tuitioning in? Or would it be possible to say, I'm sorry, we can't meet your needs, we don't have the capacity? How does that play into this?
So
Ripton had 4 students they wanted to tuition who had IEPs,
Right.
How would that work?
So I'll let Peter answer kind of the general piece, but for students who are tuitioned in from other sending districts, if they are eligible for special education, they pay the regular ed tuition rate, and then we bill them for excess costs, which are all of the services and supports that they get above and beyond what a typical student gets based on their IEP. So we bill White River for some students, bill other places. for some students.
Yeah, we don't do that based on do we have the staffing? We take the students, and then if we need to hire additional staffing, we do.
Okay. This is so helpful. I'm just trying to get the full picture here. When we've talked about equity, and some conversations have come up around after school programming, and I'm just wondering about after school programming, extracurriculars, social inclusion. What kind of supports are available, or are these supports only during the school day? Is there something, is there explicit support for those other important experiences that are related to the educational
So big question, and I'm going to give you a really broad answer because it is so specific based on the needs of each and every student. But overall, if it is a school-sponsored activity and a student needs that support to access that activity, then yes, there is a way that the school can support that. But again, I don't want you to take that out of context for every kid because it really is very individualized.
That's really great to know.
And Lindsay, I'm going to ask if you have one or two more questions, and then we'll go to Barb and Betty. And then if there's additional ones, maybe we could gather them and have Vicky respond to them offline as well.
Okay, I just have two more, and I'm trying to keep them short, but
Great.
sorry, I don't mean to
All good.
take too much time. This is like something I'm really interested in and want to know more about. So, my one of my two final questions is about the one-on-one, the role of the paraprofessional. I've heard that there will be fewer, and I'm just wondering about like paraprofessionals, substitutes, training for those roles, and if we are going to see fewer in the school, what's the plan to close that gap when it seems like those staff people make a tremendous difference in the functioning of the classroom, and for the licensed teacher to be able to have some continuity in their lessons.
Yeah, so I think the best way to answer that is kind of the short answer. And when I think about the question about subs, there is some sub training that happens, and there's some online pieces, there's a handbook, and then it really is up to the principal to orient the subs that come in. Paraprofessionals play an absolutely critical role in supporting students and supporting the classroom teachers. And we need to make sure that the classroom teachers are the ones who do the academic instruction, that paraprofessionals are there to support students, not supplant the teaching that should happen from a classroom teacher.
Okay. And then I guess my last question is just, if you haven't, if you're still looking to fill a position, or the plan in place is not fully operational, and there's significant disruptions in the classroom. I've just heard anecdotally about that happening, where learning is disrupted, and how that factors into, like, how I know the concept is universal design, but if learning has been on hold, and they're doing sort of lockdown because there's a student who's really struggling, what is there planning in place for that? I'm sure there is, but I'm just wanting to know more about it.
Yeah, and again, not an easy answer because there's so many different situations. But yes, there are plans in place for, we know that we have some students with higher levels of need. We plan for behaviors, we plan for, for the worst case scenario, and always hope for the best. And when that happens, we meet each student when they're with where they are, and again, try to get to that next level, do the best that we can to avert a crisis, to calm the situation down. Yeah, it's hard to really answer without getting into specifics,
Yeah.
but overall, plans are in place and yep, it does happen, and staff know what they need to do.
Yeah, I guess I mean for the students in the classroom who aren't receiving the services, where they might not understand what's happening, or they, yeah.
Yeah, and I know in the situations that I've heard of is you move them away from the situation, and you continue with what you're doing. So if it's interrupted, it shouldn't be interrupted for a day. It's interrupted for a short period of time. And kids are pretty resilient in getting back to what they need to do.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks, Lindsay, for those questions. That was great. Barb?
Yes, thank you, Vicki. This has been awesome. Very educational. And I apologize. I was listening to your presentation and I'm not sure if I got the whole content of something you said. You basically had said that there was, in order to qualify for services or part of the program, they have to be in the lowest 15% of the population academically. Did I catch that right?
Yeah, and that's right now what's called our adverse effect rule. So within a basic skill area, they have to be within the lowest 15th percentile of academically, behaviorally, or wherever, at their grade level peers, or with their grade level peers.
So yeah, so as a follow-up, if in fact a child was autistic and had, say, Asperger's syndrome, which I know they don't call it that now, my stepson had that, and he was on a program, an IEP, which enabled him to really excel through high school, take his SATs on a computer, all that kind of thing. But he wasn't like in the lowest percentage, right? He was very smart in many respects. So he wouldn't qualify, or someone like him?
He might not. Yeah, it's the determinations are really individualized. But yeah, he might not. He may qualify for another type of plan, but it might not, under these current rules and regulations, might not qualify for an IEP.
And are these new rules that are coming out from the feds or
the
state level?
It's new state rules. Yep. And it just shifts a little bit of the verbiage, but it could shift practice. Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. And just my one last question, and that's it, I promise. And this might be a Peter question. Of the special services that we've talked about, how much, like roughly, what percentage of that is paid for by the federal programs, federal dollars?
Yep. So we get about $600,000 in federal funds to support special education across the district. We also, the current funding formula, for whatever we spend, we get on average about a 50% reimbursement from the state. So our budget is just about $5 million. And so we back out the amount that we get from the feds, and then we get about 50% reimbursement.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And Betty.
Okay, so my question is about the other students who don't necessarily need the special support, but how does are the teachers trained to prepare those students for the, how do I phrase this? So I've heard, as a parent at games and interactions with other parents, you hear comments like, we have a kid in this class who's always, doing this and this, referring to behavior. And so how are those students prepared for prepared to understand what's happening, or to have the right language to use when they're around those students who need extra support without sounding rude or inappropriate, or with the new universal model. I don't know if that came across well.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but what I will say is that all teachers have classroom management skills that they utilize. If a student behavior gets to a place where it's a little bit beyond what the classroom teacher is comfortable with or needs support with, we have behavioral specialists that are in our buildings. We have guidance counselors in our buildings to support the teacher in supporting students. And sometimes kiddos need behavior plans, and there's some specific verbiage that can be used with them.
I think,
Yeah.
Vicki, I think the question is around what types of supports do we provide teachers to help them help other kids who are witnessing or are involved with kids that might have some challenges, to have empathy and understand that process.
Got it. So
Thank
sometimes yeah, thanks. So sometimes it's with the guidance counselor provides that support and can help teachers and classrooms work through that. Sometimes it could be a school-based clinician. We also have a couple of behavioral specialists in our buildings that can support with that. And we have a board certified behavior analyst that can support with that. And we've done that in a couple of classrooms of really talking to the students about another student's behaviors and the impacts of that. And it also helps to build incredible peer advocates as well for students.
And I'd just add that we have those supports which are more on the kind of treatment side. We also, I think the other really big impact is the culture of the classroom. And, that's the work we do with the IB Learner Profile. That's what we do, I think increasingly what we've done across ACSD, which is teachers bringing things that matter to students and having the space in the classroom for transparent and honest communication. And that's where I've seen, and I've been fortunate to step into classrooms over the years to see teachers engaging with students about that, and seeing students really reflect in a deep way that then changes how they feel about both who they are kind of in the space of that classroom and the other students in that classroom. So I think that's a really, really powerful activity or a powerful part of making sure that all feel like they belong, and regardless of what kinds of challenges any one student is going through.
Great. Nicole, do I see your hand there?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I was going to speak from my principal role while I'm still in it, that I think that's an important role the principal plays. That I know when a student's struggling, the conversation is both about the student that's struggling, but it's also about the classroom as a whole and what the teacher can do to support both ends, right? So that it's not just about one kid, it's about the classroom community and what's going to help those students who are witnessing be able to make sense of what they're witnessing and still access their learning while the other students getting their support. And that's a building the plane while you're flying it kind of thing. We work together as teams for a reason, and we figure out how do we balance all of those needs. It's actually one of the most beautiful aspects of working in a school is the way teachers and staff come together to figure those out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which really goes back to that purposeful collaboration and learning together.
Great, thank you both.
Mary, I have just one more question. Do you see a support like including American Sign Language in as one of an additional language skill? Starting at an earlier age, would that be something that would be helpful to students. And
Yeah, especially if there was a student in the class who spoke sign. We have had students in the past, and it's amazing how quickly sign language comes back when you haven't used it in a while. But yeah, we've been really creative about some supports and services when that's it. And absolutely, if kids can learn to sign, I mean, babies to sign. So yeah.
Great. Thank you both again. We really appreciate the time. And Vicki, I'm not sure if, do we have another board meeting with you?
I think one.
One more.
Not that I'm counting.
Not that there's a star on your calendar. Great. Thank you both. And Beth, I've lost Beth on my, there you go. Thank you very, very much for all your work. Great job. All right, Peter, that's it?
That's it.
Great. Moving on now to the report of the board, we'll move over to Mary G and the policy discussion. As a reminder, these policies were presented for us to review prior to this meeting, so hopefully we have all done our homework. This is an opportunity for Mary to provide some summary, and then for us to ask any questions, then for us to take our actions. Mary?
Okay, thank you. So the three policies that we have submitted for you to look at, we are here now to take any questions or so that we can amend before adopting. But if they're acceptable as they are, we'd like to just go ahead and adopt them. All three policies are based on required policies, and they are part of the we adopted them from the model policies from the Vermont State School Board. So the first one is the B20 personnel recruitment, hiring, and whatever policy. And that one we worked on for quite a while because we needed to get some help around the question about whether the board needed to be part of the appointment process, which we did find out that the board is once the staff person has been recruited and selected and appointed, the board actually approves that appointment. So that is all done. That policies basically is based on educational law and state law, so we could not amend it in any way. The second one is the homeless student policy. This became a required policy as of October of 2020. And we had already had a procedure in place through, I think it's called the McKinley law, that's been in place for a number of years. And so this is just a policy to reflect the procedure that's already made.
Yeah, it's McKinney-Vento.
McKinney-Vento. And again, that's a statute put out by the state legislature to provide education to homeless students and how we do that. So that policy is, we amended just based on we didn't amend it at all. We took it from the model policy. And then the third policy is the security cameras. I'm not sure if this is a mandated one, but it was basically a request of some of the administrators because we are using security cameras in school, and we felt like we needed a policy on how they were used. We did take the model policy from the Vermont State School Board, and the only thing we changed about it is we added cameras on our transportation, like our school buses, etc. So that's the only thing that was different than the model policy. So if anybody has any thoughts on any one of those three, we'll take questions.
Any questions on any of the policies presented? Mary Heather?
Well, I just wanted to add that we'll go in and clean up any kind of edits and things like that. I noticed in the security cameras, there's a will shall.
Oh, actually, we thought we had pulled that out when I talked with Sharon the other day, but okay.
Yeah. We were talking about will shall.
I'm sure he would appreciate that.
Right.
Mary Heather?
Sure. I have questions, just a few questions about each. Is it easier for us just to look at policy by
Why
policy?
don't we do the first policy and then we'll move to other policies.
One at a time.
Okay, so I'll just ask questions about this first one, the background check one. I did have a question about, so it looks like, I mean, obviously one of the big things that we sort of have to decide, I guess, as a board is in the selection part, item number 1, whether the cost of background checks will be done by the employer or the school district. I'm just wondering how it's currently done. Can you remind us about that?
I believe it's the cost of the applicant. Is that correct?
It's the cost of the applicant, yeah.
Right.
And is that
I don't recommend that we change that.
okay? Is that typical?
That's standard practice.
Okay, thank you. And then just a quick question about in that same section, item number 5. So it's that selection section, item number 5, where it says an unfavorable background check information is not an automatic bar to employment. I'm just wondering if we could clarify what that means. Unfavorable background check is that?
So, you know, I see all of these background checks once they're completed and have to make a determination. As you can imagine from everyone's past, anything from like running a red light and not realizing you're being followed to like, there are countless things on people's records that would not negatively impact, and many of them are 10, 20, 30 years old. Many of these would not impact the employee's ability to drive a bus, to be a paraprofessional, to be a teacher, to do many things. And I think the reason that it's in this model policy is because, I think over the last 10 years or so, organizations have realized that the approach of if there's anything on your background check whatsoever, any kind of misstep, you had a beer in your car when you were 16, that's just not fair, and doesn't reflect, I think, our understanding of how people change and giving people a chance to continue to grow. So again, like that falls to me to determine, and sometimes there are certain things that are either close in time or you using common sense realize that this is probably not the best fit for a position. So that's why that language is somewhat gray, and I think the language is appropriate.
Thank you. That's all I've got for this one.
Okay.
Any other questions on this one? Barb?
So do we, on that first section that Mary Heather brought up, I had kind of brought that up when we first introduced this, do we need to make a motion which way we want this to go, whether the prospective employee pays for it or the district? Because right now it has both in there. So how do we resolve that? Do I make a motion? Do I make a motion that, we do it one way and we vote on it? We have to decide, right?
I would say, I would recommend a motion to approve the policy with the current practice of the employee paying for the background checks.
So that will require an amendment, correct?
Well, right now, if you.
It's already in there. It's not really an amendment.
It's already in there. Right
Yeah.
now, there's 2 items in parentheses, and we have to select one of them. It can't be both. Right?
Can't that be in procedure, Peter?
Yeah.
It could be, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the procedure level will make the determination, and it would be a current practice would be followed, which is the individual pays for the background check. correct?
Yeah, that would require taking that sentence out though, right?
I think the intent of it, wasn't it, when the school board association wrote it, is for a district to decide which way you wanted to go. We want to go. Is my
Suzanne?
interpretation.
Suzanne?
I believe the reason that line is left in there is because it's done through procedure, and it allows procedurally for that amount to change, so that if later on down the road that, things switch and they decide to pay for it, doesn't have to come back to the board and change the policy. Just changes the procedure. There are districts in the state that you get fingerprinted, you might pay for it up front, you get reimbursed on the backside. So.
Part of, just to let everyone know, the VSBA, in all honesty, is that their policies are notoriously conflated between policy statements and procedural statements. So if you review all of the policies on the VSBA website, you'll find that they really have kind of been on both sides.
And it's our understanding we had to approve this as it was written because of the legal or the statutes that were in there.
Well, it's not a required policy.
Oh, it isn't? Oh, I'm sorry, then I thought it was.
The issue that you're talking about is related to contracts and how, the board's role in contracts. Yeah.
All right, so I think for the purpose of this question and vote, we're adopting this policy as is, and with the assumption that that parens is rectified in procedure determination. And if that procedure has to change in the future, the policy doesn't then have to be rewritten.
Okay.
I would make, I would just take that line out. I don't see what it just confuses things. I think then it's always just part of the policy, it's part of the implementation would decide it. That would just is my humble opinion. I would remove that line altogether.
I believe if we decide to remove the line, we do have to rewarn the policy.
Right.
Okay.
So the easiest thing may be to just select current practice, one of the two parentheses. And then if there's a change in the future, we just change the policy.
That's what I would agree with.
Great. Could I get that motion?
I'll make a motion. Let's see if I can do this. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the policy number B20, with the exception that we, in section 1, that the cost of such checks be borne by the prospective employee, and then we scratch the school district. Is that okay?
Peter, is that what you're referencing?
Yeah.
Great. Could I get a second?
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? So moved. Next one, Mayor.
Okay, the next one is the.
I hate to be a stickler for parliamentary procedure. We actually have to vote on the motion.
We're gonna vote on it.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. We've got to do that. Peter C, well done. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? That's like the best part of the whole thing.
Right.
So moved. Great. Next one, Mayor.
Okay, the next one is the homeless, educating homeless students.
Great. Any questions on that one?
Again, that's the McKinney-Vento law.
McKinney-Vento
law. And we've been operating with a procedure for many years, and now we're finally putting the policy out.
Jen, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, there was some language in there regarding providing transportation to students. And I didn't know if there was any sort of, oh, did my computer just die? Can you see me?
Hope you're good.
I went blank for some reason, so I'll just, I didn't know if there was some sort of restriction as far as like, if the kid moves to Massachusetts, are we still like obligated to, like there, it just seems so open-ended. It seemed almost dangerous to just kind of leave it that way. Did you discuss that in your committee at all?
It's
My
federal
understanding,
legislation.
it's part of the law that we have to provide the transportation.
Yep, and it's within reason. If if a student becomes homeless midway through the year, they have the opportunity to stay at their current school or the school in which they now live. If it gets to a point where it doesn't make sense, if it's going to be a 2.5-hour drive, that's just it. Yeah. So I think the furthest that we've transported is probably Burlington area, and it's split between 2 districts.
We also write it into our Title I grants. So it's complicated to manage, but it's largely grant funded.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Heather?
This is just more of a clarifying question, not necessarily a change, suggested change or anything, but I'm just curious, the identification of homeless students, is that typically something, or is that something that we have a procedure for? I'm not necessarily suggesting that it would need to be part of policy, but it's just a question.
Peter, I'll let you answer that.
Go ahead, Vicki.
Yeah, there's a whole process for it, and the homeless liaison has very clear criteria that needs to be met, and they're the ones who make the determination in collaboration and connecting with the family.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I thought it was just a procedural thing and not necessarily policy, but thanks for the clarification.
There is also with transportation, if a student is coming from another district to our district or vice versa, we work with the other district and often we will split costs for transportation.
Any other questions? Could I get a motion on this one?
A motion to approve the homeless policy.
Second?
Second.
Second, Suzanne. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Great, so moved. And the last one, Mayor.
Okay, the last one is the security cameras. Again, I don't think this is required. Suzanne, you're gonna help me with this. That's not a required one, right? Or Peter? But it was a recommend, yeah, but it was something that some of the administrators felt we needed, considering we are using cameras in school and on school buses. But we adopted the policy, we took the policy that was the model policy.
Any questions on this one? Chip?
Could I just ask how that works? And I guess from a technical point of view, maybe Will can answer this. So you have a security camera on a school bus going to Shoreham, okay? And it says you keep that recording basically for 30 days unless there's anything in it. So where is that? Is that transmitted to some central focus and you can just punch in and say bus number 6 for the last month? And you can sit there and watch it for days, or I'm trying to get a sense of where this information is stored until it finally, or does somebody clear it every month, so to speak? I guess that's my question: is where is it stored and how does it get either erased or it just continues?
That was a question we had as a policy committee too, is how is it secured so that it's only within our district that has that? So that it's not given to a central, network of people who are watching the camera. But Vicki, you said that it was, I think Vicki had told us that it was stayed within the district until, right?
That's my understanding.
It was,
yeah.
we own the video.
Yeah, Will, if I'm totally off base.
Well, I haven't had much to do with the actual bus camera stuff. I know that there's a tool that administrators can use to review that footage. it really hasn't come up like virtually at all. I can remember in Shoreham it did maybe once or twice, but that hasn't really been much of an issue. I think the storage for that is Betcha has something to do with that. You know, as far as the local cameras in the schools, that's something that we store locally, and we retain it for, we're doing it for 14 days right now. And that's, we feel is enough time to be able to, you know, if we need to review something, it's going to sort of float to the surface before 14 days, so we can have a chance to check it out. That's about as much as I know.
So on the first of every month, everything for the last 14 days is basically deleted, except in situation where somebody's brought up they wanted a review.
Yeah, you basically we have a server in every building, and a camera server, and there's properties that are configured into that server to retain data for a certain period of time, along with a lot of other properties. And so every day, you know, it's going to add a day and delete, you know, time past 14 days.
My only question is because if you watch any British mystery shows, they're constantly looking at security cameras, and they seem to be able always to go back and find the exact day, no matter what year it was. And I know that's not always true, and I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, how we secure ourselves with security cameras, and yet, you know, there's not this.
That's CCTV.
Yeah, right.
But Chip, I can tell you that I've spent an awful lot of time over the last few years making sure that these security cameras are configured properly and as secure as they can be. You know, having complex passwords because they are web-based cameras, making sure that firmware is updated. And it's actually a pretty time-consuming, tedious thing that we've finally got some help. There's a gentleman named Guy Magnano who works in the high school who I've been training to help me with some of this stuff, because it just takes a lot of time to make sure that these cameras are always updated. They're kind of flaky too, and you know, if you don't look at them all the time, you might discover that the one that you need to get some footage from has been offline for 2 months. And then
this policy is not pertinent to this, but it does bring up a whole issue of security cameras and all of them everywhere and how we manage this, even from, like you say, the personnel part of managing it, even if there's nothing you're looking for other than making sure it's secure and when it's deleted.
Well, aside from the Royal Group, which is a security company that we contract with, I'm the only person that really has access to these, and I'm sort of responsible for all the security piece of it. And I feel like they're in pretty good shape at this point. I wish they were a little bit more reliable, because it does seem like sometimes when we need to get footage, you know, that one particular camera you're looking for didn't, you know, the motion detection didn't work properly, or but they're tuned up as much as I think we can have them, and I got them locked down pretty tight.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick. So it sounds like with this policy, then we'll have to, instead of 15 days, we're going to have to store them 30 days, since it's written in policy, I believe. And the other thing that I'm a little confused about is who has the footage from the buses and under whose control it. You know, I think this policy initially was just really in-school kind of cameras. And I'm wondering, do we need to do a little bit more work on, or understanding on what and who owns the bus cameras? I'm a little concerned about that. If based on what Will said, that he doesn't have those.
Well, Will, that was primarily work that Brittany did. So Will is just speaking to what he covers.
Okay.
So the business manager who has been in charge of transportation, that's now Sharon.
Okay.
Who has taken over transportation while we're seeking a new business manager, that person has been the main contact with Vetcha. We do the Vetcha cameras are our cameras. I mean, they bought them for
Okay.
us, so that's not loaded into another spot. But I think your question
Okay.
around the 30 days, Will, is it possible to shift that from 14 to 30? Because that was a concern I had.
That's not a problem. The
seeing that.
only issue, I'm sorry, excuse me. The only issue I've got to think about is the servers that we have in each building have a storage capacity, and the longer we store stuff, the more difficult. I mean, or potentially we could run out of storage. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but without looking at it a little bit, I can't promise that. At one point, we were recording continuously in the high school, like 24/7. We weren't using motion detection, and we did have some storage problems. So it is a matter of making sure that the motion detection settings are set properly and stuff. The other thing is, I just should mention that the cameras are actually under the domain of facilities, and that's something that I got involved with at the high school a few years ago, just because when they put a whole bunch of new ones in there, they didn't really, the company that put them in didn't really set them up completely. So they weren't really functional. And, you know, I had the technical expertise, I guess, to kind of complete that. So I sort of took it on, but purchasing of the equipment and a lot of those other pieces fall under facilities. And we're sort of sharing the work on that.
So I guess, go ahead.
Go ahead, Peter.
Could we, I mean, I'd like to verify that we have the storage capacity for the 30 days. Could we bring this back at our next meeting to finalize it?
Yeah.
Great.
I agree. And now I'm kind of concerned too that the bus, what happens with the footage from the bus? We do own them, so how do we access it and then not let people at the bus company see it, other than the bus driver, obviously? But that there's got to be some kind of procedure in which those are reviewed.
Yeah, I can find that out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's already in place. That's not.
Okay. All right.
I think, Mary, you just hit it on the head. Those pieces you're asking about are all in the procedure.
Okay.
So we'll table this one then for next meeting.
Okay.
Super. And that was it, right?
That's it.
All right. Lindsay, was your question for the one that we're tabling?
It is. It's related to the last part of the discussion that we were having. I was just questioning our capacity to store that much, if there was going to be an expense to upgrade our servers, and just wondering about the personnel to maintain.
So Will's going to look into the storage and what that's going to take.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, you mentioned, Will, about realizing a camera had been offline for 2 months, and if we have the capacity to monitor when they are functioning, is there some central location that indicates when they are and are not functioning, and are you the only one who can turn them on and off?
Well, I am definitely the primary person. Like I said, I'm teaching Guy Magnano from facilities, who works for Bruce, to help with that. We're looking at, or Bruce is looking at, different cameras and cloud storage for these, with a very reputable company that makes them. We don't have any of them in place right now. There's a company called Verkada that makes security cameras and uses cloud storage, but we're far from there yet. Right now, we're storing everything locally, and one of the things that I've been talking to Guy and Bruce about for a long time is we need to have a workflow where we're monitoring them on a more regular basis, because it's pretty easy for a couple months to go by and all of a sudden discover that one is offline. Sometimes it's because they need the footage. Sometimes it's just because I happen to, get into that particular server at whatever school and discover that one hasn't been recording properly. I mean, it's not real chronic. It's not like it's happening, all the time, but they and we have we actually have some older cameras too that we're in the process of upgrading. So it's kind of a work in progress, I would say. I do feel that if we were in a situation where we had to follow, for example, an active shooter around our high school, the camera system would be functional to do that. And we have monitors set up where staff members can view all the cameras all on one big thumbnail page. And it's good software we're using. We use kind of a gold standard product for the servers. We've settled on a specific brand of camera that seems to be, have a good reputation and that we've had good luck with. I think in the past, they kind of experimented with a few different brands of cameras, but we've settled on a brand called ACSD, which seems to really work pretty well, has good support. We're paying for service contracts to make sure that if we have warranty related issues with the cameras, that we can get them replaced quickly.
Great. So Mary, you're gonna do what we need to.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Great.
Thank you.
So at this time, I think that's it from a report of the board perspective. Any announcements that anyone has for other? Great. So I think that's it, everyone. Could I get a motion to adjourn? Suzanne, wonderful. Second? Great. Everyone's hand went up for that.
Yeah. It's a universal.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Enjoy.